Often when these introductions happen, I find myself wishing people could just say, here is Oby Ezekwesili. She's going to mount the rostrum and speak to us. And that way we would gain efficiency, right? But these things happen because they sort of have to happen. What a day to be gathered, really. When Pastor Leke sent me the invitation to this event, my heart tore again because I said, oh my goodness, we can just carry on with life after we've been hit by things that happen. And then the reminder comes that there is something that we've been missing. And it can be quite a moment. What a day. What a day, my dear sister Tope. What a day. Sorry. Tell me, who did I call Tope for? That was you. Okay, I get it mixed up sometimes. Yes, tell me, what a day. What a day for all of us to be gathered in the memory of one who loved you so much. I mean, we were in Abuja with both of you, so I knew that love. I saw it. And I just want to hug you all over again and to say that the Lord will continuously hug you because he's the only one who can do it. And, to the entire family, I just bring the connection that helps us to hold strong when things like this happen. So I've been asked to speak on sustainable development goals, the role of social impact actors. I just scribbled a couple of notes, and I hope that it does make sense. So I started by saying that it is indeed a huge delight for me to glorify God for the opportunity of being among us today as we place a landmark that will institutionalize the memory of our son, husband, dad, brother, our uncle, our cousin, our friend, pastor and co-laborer in the vineyard of God, Pastor Oluwadamilare Adeboye. I shared a mutual fondness for young people and for Nigeria with Pastor Dare. It was always that. Anytime we met, it was always either about Nigeria and young people. I think a couple of the times you were in company of those meetings. I shared that deep fondness. And so these two topics were always our focus of our conversation every time that we had the opportunity of chatting. Never want to despair without hope. Pastor Dare would say to me, Ma, your love for Nigeria is inspiring, and I want you to know that God is aware. He had a way of, he had this easy flow, this easy way of just encouraging you. Moments when this would happen would probably be like a day that I am just really exhausted, and I'm thinking, why do I bother? Why do I care? I mean, people don't care and it doesn't matter. So why do you care, Oby Ezekwesili? Why don't you just leave this whole thing alone and just mind your business? There's nothing, there's no personal stake that you have in this. And then it would be those kinds of moments that I would run into Pastor Dare, and he would just speak this kind of a word, and you would know clearly that God was waiting for me. It's like God has heard me complaining, right? So he just stages me by bringing along Pastor Dare. And he says this kind of a thing. And then he says, I feel your pain. God is never going to give up on Nigeria. And then he would say, thank you, ma, for standing. All shall surely be well. I loved to be in the company of Pastor Dare. I really loved to be in his company. And then, these words of encouragement were often soothing balms that kept the heart together. I really want to thank you where you are Pastor Dare, I want to thank you. There's nothing like gratitude. Gratitude is incredible. If any one of us does not practice gratitude, it is time to remember how to practice gratitude. You know, one of the things I found in life is that God would actually forgive us if we're ungrateful to him, but he wouldn't forgive us if we're ungrateful to our fellow human beings. Do you know it's amazing? God doesn't joke with ingratitude that we show to our fellow human beings. With him, he's an all-merciful God, so he would say, listen to these ones that I created that just behave anyhow sometimes. But when you show when you're showing gratitude to a fellow human being, God takes it unkindly. And there are many passages to prove that. So I just want to say thank you for those moments that I needed a word in due season. And you came along and you gave that word. Father, we just want to thank you for your son. We thank you for his legacy, which we celebrate today. Like all of you that are gathered here today, I miss Pastor Dare's energy. Right? He was, come on guys, why are you so quiet and cool? Pastor Dare, if he were in this hall would not be quiet. Guys, come on. We're celebrating his legacy. Come on, let me feel that energy of people who are here for Pastor Dare. We know who Pastor Dare was. He was a man of energy. Never a dull moment, right? Never a dull moment. You know, so our hearts are heavy, but we celebrate the essence of an incredible fellow, one who knew the God that he served and who did exploits phenomenally. So I know that you, Pastor Dare, had such charismatic power of persuasion to focus everyone, especially the young, on the work of the master in a way that exudes joy and optimism. If there's one word to describe Pastor Dare, it was always optimism. You know, no matter how, if the sun doesn't come out, he will tell you it's about to come out. we had over the years of our chats that we would have, we began to build some ideas of what we could actually concretely design to execute that would, you know, assuage some of the common ache that we had for Nigeria and for the young people growing in the country. I vividly remember our last chat. It was a plan that we hatched while we were sitting at the airport in Abuja. He was on a flight, I think, to Port Harcourt, and I was on a flight to Lagos. And the flights were delayed, like I'm saying something you don't know about. You know, so we sat for hours and we had such fascinating conversation. It's now I realize that it was my own goodbye, because we spent it was the longest time that we actually just sat and we were talking. So that was my goodbye. You know, what were we virtually discussing to execute? We were designing. I struck up this conversation with him and said, Pastor Dare, the most significant thing that is happening in the 21st century of our lives is a sea change in economic structures of the world. I said the economic structure of the world is changing phenomenally. I said disruptive technologies would have such an impact on human civilization, much more than the cumulative impact of what we saw with the agrarian revolution, with the industrial revolution, and even with knowledge revolution. I said to him that what would happen through blockchain technologies, the AIs, artificial intelligence, Internet of Things, what would happen with the algorithms and everything that has to do with all these disruptive technologies of all kinds would so transform our world. And I said, guess what? It's actually Africa's moment. I said, if Africa gets it, it would take Africa shorter time span than it took China to happen. I mean, 40 years ago, nobody imagined today's China. I can tell you that. 40 years ago, just 40 years ago. 30 years ago, nobody even imagined the kinds of progress that India has made. But guess what is interesting about this? These two countries made their progress sans technology, that is, without the kind of disruptive technologies that we're talking about. It's incredible. They did it. So imagine that Africa, which missed the agrarian revolution, missed the bus of industrial revolution, missed a bit of knowledge revolution, but caught on to the ICT revolution. That was Africa's first revolution. The fact that almost going on now to 1 billion African citizens have access to what we call the phone, the mobile phone, is their revolution. It's the first developmental revolution that the continent has seen. And the thing about this revolution is that it actually is one where the phone, not the motorbike, not the car, is the most important asset of the African. The African with access to a smartphone is highly equipped for today's world. So it is kind of radical structural transformation that can jumpstart a continent. And so we had this very interesting, you can imagine how we enjoyed ourselves talking about this. And then I said to him, I said, Pastor Dare, I'd like you to read the book, Startup Nation. I said, you read that book, because you will get to understand how it is that the nation of Israel is so blessed. The nation of Israel is blessed because, according to the Almighty, in that conversation that he had, where he said about, he has imbued the Spirit, his Spirit, into Bezalel and Aholiab, right? In the cunningness and the skills and the capacities that were needed to create a certain level of economic transformation. You think that construction that happened in that time, it wasn't a normal thing. It was an invention. So when God talks about, he gives his people the power of witty inventions, what do you think he's talking about? So I said to him, I said, read that book. And I said to him, Pastor Dare, what I would want you to think about, because you've got such influential grasp of what it means to be a young person growing up in Nigeria, and you've got influence with these young people, at least within our own family of the Redeemed Christian Church of God. I'd like us to consider designing innovation and technology hubs everywhere that our young people are in the Redeemed Christian Church of God. I said, innovation and technology hubs. Just starting off with innovation and technology hubs, we would just incredibly build such human capabilities of the ones that will lead the continent. Because the first mover principle always is a given. Pastor Heidi, I'm sure you know the first mover principle. The first mover principle. We're at the cusp of a structural change, of an economic structural transformation. Those who catch on to it and understand it have the first mover advantage. And I said, we have to design technology hubs, innovation hubs. I said, we've got a captive audience of young people. You can't just leave them at the level of, learn these skills and know how to do soap. No, they can do more than do soap. They carry powerful instincts within them that we can unlock, that we can unleash. And we spoke about this, and we had this perfect plan of how we were going to meet to elaborate on it. So when I heard of his passing, It was too painful. It really was. It was. I have to tell you that I had promised him that I would be available to guide him in the initiative, and he was super excited. Both of us were having this conversation when our flights were simultaneously announced. We both got up, but you could see, thank you, you could see that we felt like we had solved the problems already. That was the effect of Pastor Dare. He would give you hope, right? He would talk in a way that would give you hope for the future. I suddenly just sort of felt like hope was triggered, and our faces showed it. For me, Pastor Dare's death, coming within a year of the loss of Nem, my mom, was hard. I wondered so much about the ways of God that I just had to begin again. Sort of like, Lord, I agree. Paul was right. Not that we have comprehended. We can't comprehend. So it's always a begin again. Because, how do you explain God and his doings? So that's where I hung it. And my message to our dad, our mom, and to siblings was basically, may God carry you. Who else? In situations like this, may God carry you. What else can make sense at the loss of a person like Pastor Dare? Daddy and mommy, may our good Lord never stop carrying and talking to you in the exact words that you need every time that your heart remembers and you ache for the void that our brother's translation created. Now to the points that I'd like to make on the topic. As the world further suffers from deeper economic crisis in this 2022, worsened by the paradox of disruptive technologies-led structural economic changes and global health pandemic, the issues of global growth and development have become even more topical. For example, as poverty has worsened in countries of Africa since 2020, so also have people in advanced economies begun to line up for food. Global food crisis as a result of high inflationary trend has meant that more Americans have signed up to food banks than have been seen since the depression. So that's telling you a story that the world is at a very, very difficult place. The data on Africa before the global pandemic was that by the year 2030, 90% of the world's poor would be residing in Africa. 90% of the world's poor people, the address of poverty would be Africa. Now, that is such a dismal data because, South Asia, Latin America, some part of Middle East shared poverty data with us. But imagine a situation where they all inch out of it. And 2030, which is just about 8 years from now, right? We would be 90% of world's poverty. That is depressing. That is depressing. That is painful. But that's the reality of what data was showing even before the global pandemic. Growth and development have stalled across most regions of the world for diverse people. And as a result of multiple barriers that stand in the way of growth and development, we see the escalation of poverty. Because when people say, what do you mean by economic growth? Well, let me just say it simply for you so you can understand. Without economic growth, it is impossible to tackle poverty. Economies must grow for poverty to be reduced. However, we normally say that growth is a necessary but not sufficient condition for tackling poverty. Why is that so? Because some growth can happen without it reducing poverty. It depends on who is capturing the benefit of growth. So the reason that we're gathered is because we know of a brother who cared for inclusion. Pastor Dare didn't discriminate between anybody's background, did he? Many of you are in this hall. I know people, that Pastor Dare was just a people's person. That's about inclusion, isn't it? So the fact that inclusion has not happened as much as it should has meant that even though in the years since capitalism got the upper hand amongst all economic systems that have been tried around the world advanced economically much more than ever before. Since the 19th century to the 21st century, it's been phenomenal kind of rapid progress of the world. And we have seen many countries, like I mentioned, the Chinas of this world, go from poverty. Guys, do you know that, China's income per capita was less than that of Nigeria in the 60s. That of Singapore was just about 30% more than that of Nigeria. Today, Nigeria's GDP per capita is a little above $2,000, depending on the exchange rate of the dollar to the naira. But that of Singapore is $60,000. Like their former prime minister, now deceased, great statesman, said, they went from third to first world. So everything that Pastor Dare represented was about an urgency to see people become. Because if people could become, then society could become. So anything about a discussion on SDGs is actually a discussion of the thoughts, the intellectual thoughts of the person we celebrate today. Because his intellectual thoughts kept telling him that there's something about the human being who, if they got the support that are germane to unlocking their possibilities, could become so productive that society would benefit collectively. Do I hear somebody say an amen? Sometimes, when I'm teaching, I find myself wanting to tell my students to say amen. and then I remember where I am. But it's an amen. Because his thoughts were vivid. His thoughts were right on the money. They were on the money. So we know now that the phenomenon that our world has been trying to solve. I mean, the history of the SDGs come a long way. There were different times in global development when the world sort of said, oh my God, there are so many poor people. You remember, I was VP at the World Bank. The World Bank and the IMF, as Bretton Woods institutions, emerged because there was a time when global economy was in a nosedive. And so there had to be a conversation at New Hampshire that led to an agreement of a global mechanism through which the economies of the world could be better coordinated and managed. It led to the emergence of the IMF and then the World Bank. And this was following the World War. And the World Bank was created to be an instrument to support a rebuilding of Europe which had been massively destroyed, like when you look at what's going on in Ukraine, similar to what happened in many countries of Europe. The Allied forces and I forget what the something axis were. And it was a massive destruction of Europe. And so the World Bank was created for the development of Europe. Now, after that, suddenly the Europeans and America were sort of saying, you know, these countries in the rest of the world that are poor, we've got to do something about that. And so the mission of the World Bank became to tackle poverty in regions that were not doing well. So the World Bank, all the development institutions, you know, for example, our own regional development institution, the Africa Development Bank, or the Asian Development Bank, and all these other institutions, bilateral systems, they all began to focus on the matter of tackling poverty. But the more money was put into tackling poverty, the more that poverty grew, especially in our continent. And then the world began to discuss, what more do we do? He said, okay, let's come back to the table and agree a more coordinated and coherent approach. And that's what led to the 2000. In the year 2000, the world had a conversation on Millennium Development Goals. It identified certain goals that it said, if everybody just focused on those goals and supported whether you're multilateral or you're bilateral or you're anything, government, we would do better. The Millennium Development Goals were designed to be accounted for by 2015. By the time of 2015, majority of the countries in Africa, including Nigeria, were off track. So the world said, let's have another conversation on how to arrest this situation. And then that conversation, that's what led to what you now know as the Sustainable Development Goals. The Sustainable Development Goals sort of said, let's build on the lessons we learned from the MDGs. There were some aspects of the MDGs where some progress was made. For example, the MDG 1 had said we would like to halve poverty by 2015. It did achieve that, but guess where it achieved it from? Mostly China. Because China, in a matter of 3 decades, had moved over 500 million citizens out of poverty. Unbelievable. To show us that it can be done. If we're brothers and sisters of Dare, we must be optimistic, right? That it is possible. So that happened. That kind of improvement happened in MDG 1 on poverty, and then talked about eradicating hunger, and that was tougher. It talked about universal access to education. Many more children entered into the school system. So there were some gains, but in a holistic assessment, it was not a success. So the SDGs now came. Now the SDGs, they said, let's not make it an instrument where the poor are the ones who are getting MDG support. Let's make it a universal accountability thing so that every country would commit to SDGs. So many countries so liked what came out analytically as the SDGs that they used it, adopted it as the template for their economic development strategies. There are 17 key goals that every country is expected to focus on. And then it identified the kind of resources that would be needed in order for countries to invest in those areas that are necessary to achieve the SDGs. Now, in the effort toward achieving the SDGs, I think estimates say something like $2.5 trillion is needed to invest annually in the low-income countries. $2.5 trillion. It was at part of this discussion of what is necessary to achieve the SDGs that everyone came to the reality that just governments and development assistance from other countries will not do it. That for you to achieve the development objectives of the SDGs, that you're going to need non-state actors to be part of the SDGs. Unlike the lack of emphasis on non-state actors in the MDGs, the SDGs became about, you call them social impact actors. And that's how the private sector, from the perspective of pure investment, if the markets work, if countries would just put the right kinds of policies across the spectrum of governance, it would excite the private sector, because the private sector is after all not waking up to be Father Christmas. When people gather in the boardroom, they are thinking cold-hearted figures. Where does it make sense to put $1? And where does it not make sense? And so if countries would carry out the right economic policies, the right social policies, the right policies across the spectrum of sectors, and if they would build the right regulatory systems and institutions, and if countries would be sensible in the way they would invest their resources to provide the basic goods and services that their citizens need in order to be productive, that businesses need in order to reduce the cost of doing business in their regions, they would attract private flows, right? That was one. But the second was also that for the private sector, if they would show a great interest in being good corporate citizens, that they would not just simply operate and make profit, and the only thing that matters to them would be profit, but that they would care about the social impact that they have, that they would care to be ethical players, that they would care to be people that invest in the needs of society other than what the market tells them has the opportunity for profit. That they would actually care about the environment and the sustainability issues that are connected with production systems, that we would have a different kind of world. So the private sector signed on to the SDGs. And then, of course, the other non-state actors, the civil society, and all the NGOs and the CBOs, community-based organizations, non-governmental organizations, civil society organizations, just name them, religious bodies, faith-based organizations, and all kinds of actors. These are the social impact actors you're talking about. Today, we celebrate one of them. Pastor Dare, by virtue of his person, was always an SDG person without realizing it. When Pastor Dare died, I read some of the people testifying of what he did. It was like the story of Tabitha, right? Oh, this person said, Pastor Dare did this for me. Pastor Dare was the reason I went to school. Pastor Dare was the reason they didn't throw me out of my home. He paid my rent. Pastor Dare, Pastor Dare, Pastor Dare. He was doing SDGs, except that we were not monitoring. And so, Pastor Leke, Pastor Pastor Deolu, and my dear sister Temi, we are here because he was already doing what you're trying to organize. We're only here so that we can bring coherence to it. The role of non-state actors, the role of social impact actors in achieving the SDGs has been very, very important, and it's been catalogued. That often social impact actors end up having more impact in the spend on issues of MDGs. Did you hear me well? More than government. So they lead the way by virtue of making their passion achieve efficiency. So whereas government and its bureaucracies can reduce the value for money in spend concerning the SDGs, the 17 of them, whether it's the SDG on education, on health, on environment, on agriculture, on infrastructure, on partnerships, on on gender, it has been found that non-state actors that are passion-driven, that are mission-driven, end up with more value for money than government. So number one thing that is a major role for the Dare Foundation, Dare Adeboye's Foundation, is to prove its mettle in being a standout foundation that when it spends a dime, when it spends a naira on any area that is connected to the SDGs, Pastor Leke, we must see high value for money. So when we see that high value for money, it sets a standard for the data that is collected. We need to collect data. Pastor Heidi, I'm so glad you're here. The RCCG, corporate social responsibility, the Christian social responsibility is actually the original. It's the origin of corporate social responsibility. The church was always in Christian social responsibility. He was always in it. We simply did not define it for what it was. Pastor ID and myself were the Apapa family of the early 90s. And the social responsibility thing, social reformation. I had the privilege of having been the head of department of social reformation in Apapa in those days. As a matter of fact, it was in that capacity that I met Daddy for the first time in my life and forever became his daughter, right? And one thing is clear. We were always in that space. Now we have organized it better. We call it the CSR. We must now do even better because we must show the standard of effective delivery on every goal that is connected to the SDGs. You see, every aspect of our intervention, of our investment on these matters, we must determine which SDG we're contributing to. Why is this important? It is important because, for goodness sake, if the church can lead the way, then the church has the moral pedestal to stand, to demand for the kind of strategic transformation that can happen in a nation. This nation is in crisis of development. Think of it. We're in a crisis of development. There is no longer a mystery to development. I just told you, 40 years ago, nobody saw China coming. 30 years ago, nobody saw India coming. When we have studied those countries, there's a similarity of pattern in terms of what led to growth and development. So development is no longer a mystery. If it remains a mystery, then Jesus Christ, who is our Lord and personal Savior, who is our Master, who gives us the capacity to be able to do things, will make us do so well with this foundation that would be able to show the scorecard of the impact. We can take all of the RCCG investment in all the 17 SDGs. We are there. I looked through. We are there. We're doing something on each of the 17 SDGs in RCCG. So, Pastor Leke, we need that this foundation can actually partner with the Pastor Idowu's program and be like a resource of knowledge and research and studies and data. We need to find the indicators for everything we do in RCCG. Be the brain trust. That would be a phenomenal service. In 196 countries of the world, do you know what we're contributing to the SDGs? We don't. Because we have not identified the indicators to measure. We need that. And guess what? We have the human capital to do it. Don't we? I think we underrate ourselves in Redeemed a lot. Because the community of people that God has gathered around the world, the skills that exist, let's mine our data. Let's mine the data. Let's collect the right kinds of data. We would find the human capital we need for every aspect of SDGs. They're already operating in it. We just need to amalgamate them and get them to work. The work of showing the way. Do I hear an amen? Amen. Ladies and gentlemen, I am so passionate about these things. You know me. When it comes to the issues of how society can improve, it annoys me. It annoys me that we should have so many poor people around us. And more of the poverty is showing up in the church. We're the church of Christ, the Commonwealth of Israel. How is it that we have to scream and scream and scream to put up a block in building a church or in doing mission work? It is because we're not connecting to the incredible power that is within us and amongst us. And I think that this foundation can do a lot in terms of investing in the knowledge that unlocks some of the things, some of the dots that we have not connected. There are many dots that need to be connected. Scattered, it's like the valley of the dry bones. And you got to connect the dots. When we connect the dots, it's going to be powerful. I'm putting a lot of hope on this foundation. That in terms of a knowledge trust, Pastor Dare cared about knowledge. I am telling you, we didn't want to stop our conversation, that last conversation. I wish he could just speak from where he is and say, Sister Oby, can we continue that conversation? So let's invest in that. Another thing that another point that I do want to make is that we have often seen people start foundations and then they get lost because they want to do many things. Avoid that. Avoid that. We're going to do better by being focused. We can take 5 of the MDGs, 3 of the MDGs, and simply just say, we're just going to keep doing them and doing them so well that we become the experts in the delivery of such programs. Because to be an expert in the delivery of a development program with all the measurement and evaluation, the bells and whistles that you can put into understanding how well you're doing, you know what it does? It positions us for scale. Positions us for scale. This foundation could then become a service provider. You know what it means to be a service provider? So someone, Deolu, that your company grows into a mega $1 billion, industry, and you want to do CSR, and you simply say to the Oby Ezekwesili Foundation, you guys deliver this particular program well. Here's the money. Deliver it. These are the performance indicators I'm giving to you to show me at the end of the delivery. We can become that as a foundation. We do it so well because we've taken a particular aspect, honed in on it, and we're delivering well. So we can be service providers. Pastor ID can simply say, you know what? Let me gather all my people in the CSR department globally and let's see what are the interventions that have worked that we can take to scale. People, we have to be in a hurry. Jesus Christ cannot come and see us. Someone who, even before he came, it was Moses speaking to the people of Israel and saying to them, when you reap your thing, you harvest don't glean everything. You must leave something. What do you think that was? That was CSR. That was CSR. Big time CSR. And it is not okay for all of us to be comfortable in our little comforts and watch poverty escalate around us. No, people. God is not pleased. He's not. My heart aches. But what can one individual do? And that's my third point for you, Pastor Leke. There is nothing that was Pastor Dare that was insular. He was not an insular person. Pastor Dare, Pastor Deolu, he understood the power of connection. Collaboration is key. The 21st century, small is no longer beautiful. Collaboration is key. Cooperation, partnership, leverage. It's about how do I turn my 1 naira to achieve the outcome of 20 naira. I can if I stopped thinking of who would collect the glory. Ladies and gentlemen, I have so much to say, but I got to go. Because if you leave me here, there's so much that I'm going to be saying. Because that's how much I feel about this brother we celebrate today. He represented, look, Pastor Dare lived for something. He's a lesson in the fact that it doesn't matter if you can live for 90 years and live for nothing. You die for nothing. My heart is filled with joy that we can be gathered today to celebrate our brother by institutionalizing a legacy. A legacy that we all must be interested in keeping up. I have said in my note, laying the groundwork for a high-impact foundation in the name of Pastor Dare Adeboye is a duty for every one of us that he blessed their lives. Every one of us. If it was a word of a smile that he gave to you, he sowed. It is important that we should sow to institutionalize this legacy. I said here, narrow the focus area of involvement and test models of execution for high impact and sustainability. Go from small, learn the lessons, and move to scale. The tool to allow you monitor the performance of the SDGs in any community, develop it. You can adopt the IMF tool to monitor SDG performance in education, in health, roads, electricity, water and sanitation. But I see those focus areas and I'm excited by them that you have chosen. Because one major thing that Pastor Dare represented was the idea that leadership can be servant-led. That leadership can be entirely about service. And so, that whole idea of volunteerism by the youth of this family, let's not forget it, Pastor Deolu and Pastor Leke, Sister Temi, don't forget it. He had a social movement. Just that he didn't name it. Am I correct? Young people that are here, you felt like you were connected to a social movement, didn't you? With Pastor Dare, there was that. People just felt connected. That is a volunteerism system. You need to unlock it. The foundation has an army of volunteers. That's important for building the next base of leaders. Take that as part of your pillar. In your governance pillar, that is an important aspect to develop. And then I talked about unlocking the resources of the church. I've told you that you have to go and talk to Pastor ID. I talked about identifying gaps and opportunities. We must identify gaps and opportunities. And the only way we do that is through analysis. Please don't do like most foundations around this part of the world. They just throw money into things. No basis for the decision making. This foundation must be evidence-based in the way that it chooses what to do and what not to do. Be evidence-driven. I said, collect and leverage the data in church community, produce quality content to enable church leadership mobilize RCC members in the private sector to set up contribution that will achieve the SDGs. Imagine the power of us having everyone who is a business person, a company owner, understand that the church cares about SDGs. Just imagine how much of a pace setter RCCG would be. Would say our members, no member of ours who has a company is not doing something about the SDGs. What a powerful message that is. We're not saying all of this so that the world can clap for us. No. When you're in the business of your father's house, your father's work, whether they clap for you, they insult you, they abuse. They insult me. They insult me. And you know what? It doesn't mean anything to me. I know who has sent me. It's only when you don't know who has sent you. That's when you're busy. Looking left, looking right. No, not me. I'm about my father's business. If it were my business, I would worry. But I don't worry. Because I'm about my father's business. So we're not saying let's church do these things so that people will see that Redeemed is doing. No. It's a father's business. And we're going to do it. And we're going to show that we're doing it because we want the world to see that it can be done. It is not so that they can clap for us. It is just so that we can inspire people to know that they are capable. Pastor Temi, they would see you and they would say, look at this woman. Oh, you will be an incredible sign and wonder. You have a whole ministry ahead of you, Pastor Temi. You have an incredible ministry ahead of you. Your life has only just begun. I need you to know that. Let me say, in concluding, that I am a founder of a school that is building new leaders for our continent, for our country. The School of Politics, Policy and Governance, the SPPG. I want to say to you, Pastor Deolu, Statemi, Pastor Leke, that I offer full partnership between SPPG and the Oluwadamilare Foundation in the raising of a new genre of leaders. Leaders that will be so confident like Pastor Dare. Pastor Dare was the one who sort of said to the Redeemed Christian Church of God young people that you're not missing anything in the world. Because you follow Jesus does not mean that you can't have swag, that you can't have vibes, that you can't be dope. That was Pastor. So let's build those leaders that he was already building. So my commitment is to this foundation. Pastor Chinedu has said that I should also announce that we would be supporting. I like transparency, but not in this case. We won't mention the amount, but we are definitely investing in this foundation. I want to thank you for the opportunity of interacting with you. I will forever cherish the fact that my brother, Pastor Dare, passed through and that I knew him very well. God bless you all. Thank you very much.